She never gets a name. In a book filled with generals, priests, prostitutes, and kings, every one of them named, this girl walks out of her father's house dancing, tambourine in hand, and the Bible refuses to tell you who she is. That detail is not an accident. That detail is the whole sermon. Her father, Jephthah, has just won the most important battle of his life. He made a vow before the fight, a vow to God. And the moment he sees his daughter running toward him, his only child, his clothes tear, his face falls. And he says the 6 words that should haunt every Bible reader who has ever skipped this chapter: "You have brought me very low, not I'm sorry, not I made a terrible mistake." He blamed her for being alive, for being the first thing out the door. She dies because of a vow her father made, and the text never once calls it righteous. Stay with me here, because the way your Bible translates this passage has been quietly protecting you from the full weight of what happened. And that protection has cost us something important. The Hebrew word at the center of this story is neder. And in ancient Israelite culture, a neder was not a casual promise. It was a binding, legal, sacred transaction with God. You say it, you owe it. Leviticus 27 is an entire chapter governing how vows worked. Numbers 30 regulates who can make them. This was serious architecture in their religious world. Now here's where it gets complicated. Jephthah's vow, in the original Hebrew, reads, "Whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me, I will offer it up as a burnt offering." The word for whatever, asher, is neutral. Scholars have debated for 2,000 years whether Jephthah meant a person or an animal. Many commentators, especially medieval Jewish interpreters like Rashi, argued the vow was never meant to include a human being, that Jephthah could have paid a redemption price, as Leviticus 27 allows for dedicated persons. He didn't have to go through with it. The law had an exit ramp, but he walked past it. And Christian commentators, many of them for centuries, treated Jephthah as a hero of faith. Hebrews 11:32 lists him in the Faith Hall of Fame, which causes some readers to assume the vow was godly, the sacrifice was acceptable, and the daughter was simply collateral theology. But Hebrews 11 does not say every action of every person listed was righteous. It says they had faith. Samson sleeps with prostitutes and destroys himself in revenge. David commits adultery and orchestrates a murder. Faith and moral failure are not mutually exclusive. The New Testament is not endorsing Jephthah's vow, it's noting he fought. That distinction matters more than most churches will tell you. Let me take you into the narrative itself, because the writer of Judges constructed this story with almost unbearable literary precision. Jephthah was a man born outside the system. His mother was a prostitute. His half-brothers drove him out, told him he would inherit nothing. He became a gang leader in the land of Tob, a rough man running a rough crew in the wilderness. When war came and Israel needed a fighter, they came crawling back to him. He negotiated his reinstatement before he lifted a single sword. The man knew how to make deals. So when the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and the text says that clearly the Spirit moved on him before the vow, you have to wonder, why did he make the vow at all? He already had divine empowerment. This is not a man who lacked confidence. This is not a desperate, trembling soldier who had no other option. This is a seasoned military commander who had already been promised the Spirit of God. The vow was something else. It was transactional religion. Who had spent his whole life making deals with gang members, with elders, now with God. He was negotiating with the Almighty. And does respond. Read it carefully. God never affirms the vow. God never says, "Yes, good deal, I accept." The silence in the text is devastating. Jephthah makes his vow into empty air, wins the battle because of grace he had already been given, and comes home to collect. Then she comes dancing out the door. Now pull back. Wider. Because this story is embedded in the book of Judges for a reason. Judges is not a celebration. It is a documentation of collapse. Every chapter is another rung down the ladder, the famous refrain. In those days there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes, is not Israel's freedom motto. It's the narrator's diagnosis of their disease. Jephthah's vow is the logical end of a culture that has lost its theological center. When you don't know who God actually is, what he wants, how he operates, what he hates, you fill the gap with your own religious instincts. And sometimes your religious instincts are catastrophically wrong. The surrounding nations sacrificed children. Molech demanded them. The entire Levitical system was designed in part to distinguish Israel from that practice. The ram caught in the thicket at Moriah, Isaac spared, was the definitive statement, "My God does not want your children." The entire sacrificial system after that was animals, blood of bulls and goats. Jephthah, a man raised on the margins of Israel, possibly syncretized, possibly mixing Yahweh worship with the religious logic of Canaan, makes a vow that sounds more like Molech than Moses, and the church reads it at a funeral and moves on. I want to stop here for a moment and be honest with you. I grew up in a tradition where questioning the Bible felt dangerous. Not questioning the text itself, but questioning the people inside it. The assumption was, If someone is in the Bible, especially if they're in Hebrews 11, you don't criticize them. You find the lesson, you make it palatable, you protect the reader from discomfort. But I remember the first time I read Judges 11 slowly, really slowly. I had a daughter by then. She was maybe 4 years old, and I remember sitting with my Bible open and feeling something in my chest go cold and tight. Because Jephthah's daughter says something to her father that I cannot shake. She says, "Do to me according to what has gone out of your mouth." She submits. She doesn't run. She asks for 2 months in the mountains to mourn not her death but her virginity, her unlived life, her future that will never happen. And then she comes back. She honors a vow she never made. She pays a price she never owed. And I thought, this child is braver than her father ever was. He made the vow to look powerful. She bore the weight of it with more dignity than he deserved. That wrecked me. And I think it should wreck you too. Not paralyze you, wreck you. There's a difference. Being wrecked means something true got through. If this kind of deep textual work is what you come here for, the questions churches skip, the Hebrew that changes everything, the Bible stories that don't fit on a bumper sticker, then hit subscribe. We go into the difficult places every single week, and it's free. So, now here is where I need you to lean in, because there's a second debate, a significant one. Some scholars argue she didn't die. They point to the fact that the text in Hebrew is ambiguous. The phrase often translated, "he fulfilled the vow," may not specify death. And the memorial that follows, women in Israel going yearly to lament the daughter of Jephthah for 4 days, uses a Hebrew word, tana, that appears only twice in the entire Old Testament. It might mean lament. It might mean rehearse or recount, to remember, to tell the story. Some argue she was dedicated to the Lord, consecrated, a perpetual virgin in service at the tabernacle, like Samuel, like Anna. This reading tries to honor the vow without the horror. I want to be fair to that view, I really do. But here's what the text doesn't let me escape: his clothes tear when he sees her. Tearing clothes is a grief response, not an inconvenience response. He says, "I have opened my mouth to the Lord and cannot take it back." That language echoes vow language that ends in death throughout the ancient Near East. She asks to mourn her virginity, not her celibacy. In a culture where childlessness was death and a daughter's purpose was lineage, mourning her virginity was mourning her extinction. And perhaps most damning, her name is never given. In a book where even minor characters get names, the erasure of her identity feels intentional. Like the text itself is staging a kind of death, an existence unmemorialized by history while being memorialized in grief. She was likely killed. And the Bible never calls it good. That's the point. God's silence in the text is not God's approval. God's silence is the author's way of letting the horror of the act testify against itself. This is how Judges works. The book doesn't moralize out loud. It shows you the consequences. It lets the darkness speak. Jephthah is not a villain in a mustache. He's a man of genuine faith who carried a broken theology, shaped by trauma, by exile, by a culture bleeding out, and that broken theology cost his daughter her life. So what do you do with this? First, stop protecting yourself from the hard texts. The Bible is not a collection of inspirational quotes with a difficult backstory. It is a brutally honest record of what happens when human beings, even faithful ones, engage God with distorted understandings of who He is. The hard texts are not bugs. They are features. They are mirrors. Second, examine the vows in your own life, not formal oaths, the quiet, internal transactions. God, if you do this, I'll do that. God, if you give me this, I'll give you that. That's Jephthah's logic. God is not a deity who needs your negotiations. Grace is not a deal. The Spirit was already on him. Whatever you're bargaining with God to earn, you need to ask whether it was yours to give in the first place. Third, pay attention to who pays the price when we make reckless religious promises. It's almost never us. It's the people around us, the children, the ones who didn't vote for our theology, the ones who come dancing out the door in innocence and get caught in the machinery of our unexamined vows. Jephthah's daughter didn't make a deal with God. She just lived in her father's house. Be careful what you build. Someone is living in it. There's a tradition in Jewish interpretation, not in the canon but preserved in the Midrash, that Jephthah's daughter went to every sage in Israel to find a way out, that someone could have released him from the vow, that Phinehas the priest had the authority to do it. But Jephthah was too proud to go to Phinehas, and Phinehas was too proud to go to Jephthah, and so she died in the gap between two proud men who wouldn't move. She never gets a name, but every year the women remembered her, and now you do too. Go dancing carefully.